The morning bell rang across the Silver Moon Pack compound, its sharp clang reverberating through the wooden walls of the servants' quarters. Lyra's eyes snapped open, though she'd been awake for hours, listening to the pre-dawn sounds of the pack stirring to life. She rose from her thin mattress on the floor, careful not to make a sound, just as she had every morning for the past 8 years. At 23, Lyra had perfected the art of invisibility. She moved through the pack house like a ghost, her bare feet making no sound on the cold stone floors. The other servants barely noticed her anymore, the mute girl who scrubbed floors and washed linens, who never spoke, never complained, never drew attention to herself. It was exactly what she wanted. Girl. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Thornwick, snapped her fingers in Lyra's direction. The guest chambers on the 3rd floor need to be prepared. A Alpha King arrives this afternoon. Lyra nodded obediently, keeping her eyes downcast. She learned long ago that eye contact quite invited questions, and questions were dangerous. She grabbed her cleaning supplies and headed toward the stairs, her heart beating faster at the mention of the Alpha King. Cale Blackwood. Even his name sent shivers through the werewolf community. The most powerful alpha in generations, he'd unified the northern packs under his rule through a combination of strategic brilliance and raw power. Unmated at 30, he was said to be searching for his destined mate, though rumors whispered he'd rejected several potential matches already, finding none worthy of standing beside him. Lyra pushed the thoughts away as she entered the guest suite. It didn't matter who visited the Silver Moon Pack. She was nobody, nothing, just a mute servant girl without a wolf, without a voice, without a future. Except that was a lie. The truth was buried so deep inside her that sometimes Lyra almost forgot it herself. She did have a wolf, a powerful one, that had emerged on her 15th birthday with silver-white fur that marked her as something rare, something special. And she did have a voice, though she hadn't used it in 8 years. She'd hidden both the day her wolf first appeared, the day she'd realized what her unusual coloring meant. Silver wolves were legendary, appearing only once every few generations. They were said to possess extraordinary abilities, to be destined for greatness. They were also claimed immediately by the strongest alphas, taken from their families, forced into matings they didn't choose. Lyra had watched it happen to her cousin Lyra. At 16, Lyra's silver wolf had emerged during a pack gathering. Within hours, she'd been claimed by an alpha from the Eastern Territories, dragged away screaming as her parents wept helplessly. Pack law was absolute. A silver wolf belonged to whoever could claim her first, a prize to strengthen bloodlines and consolidate power. So Lyra had made a choice. She'd hidden her wolf, suppressing every shift, every instinct. And she'd stopped speaking because voices could give away too much. Emotion, intelligence, the strength of will that might hint at the power she concealed. For 8 years, she'd lived in silence and servitude, and she'd survived. Now, as she smoothed fresh linens over the massive bed in the Alpha King suite, Lyra told herself that this visit would be no different. She would clean his rooms, avoid his presence, and continue her invisible existence. She had no way of knowing that everything was about to change. Chapter 2. The Arrival. The Alpha King's motorcade arrived precisely at 3 o'clock, a line of black vehicles rolling through the Silver Moon Pack's gates like a dark omen. Lyra watched from a 3rd-floor window hidden behind heavy curtains as Cale Blackwood emerged from the lead car. Even from this distance, his presence was overwhelming. Tall and broad-shouldered, he moved with the lethal grace of an apex predator. His dark hair caught the afternoon sunlight, and even without seeing his face clearly, Lyra could sense the raw power radiating from him. She stepped back from the window, her pulse quickening for reasons she didn't want to examine. It didn't matter how commanding he was. She had no intention of getting anywhere near him. "All servants to the main hall!" Mrs. Thornwick's voice echoed through the corridors. "The Alpha King wishes to greet the household." Lyra's stomach dropped. This wasn't protocol. Visiting dignitaries didn't typically bother with servants. She considered hiding, but Mrs. Thornwick was already herding everyone toward the stairs, her sharp eyes making sure no one escaped. The main hall was packed with pack members and staff, all arranged in careful hierarchy. Lyra positioned herself in the very back, behind taller servants, making herself as small and unnoticeable as possible. She kept her head down, her breathing shallow. Alpha Kieran of the Silver Moon Pack stood at the front, greeting Cale Blackwood with the deference due to a superior alpha. Their voices carried across the hall as they discussed territory matters, trade agreements, and pack alliances. Lyra tried not to listen, focusing instead on studying the floor tiles, counting them to keep her mind occupied. "I appreciate your hospitality, Alpha Kieran." Kyle's voice was deep and commanding, the kind of voice that made submission feel instinctive. "Before we proceed to formal negotiations, I like to meet your pack. All of them." Lyra's head snapped up involuntarily. "All of them?" Her heart began to race. "Of course, Your Majesty," Kieran replied. "As you can see, we've assembled everyone for your review." What happened next would haunt Lyra's nightmares for weeks to come. Kyle Blackwood's eyes swept across the assembled crowd, a casual scan that seemed almost lazy until his gaze reached the back of the room. Then he froze. His entire body went rigid, his nostrils flaring as if catching a scent. His eyes locked directly onto Lyra. For one horrible, suspended moment, they stared at each other across the crowded hall. His eyes were storm gray, intense enough to make her feel like he could see straight through every defense she'd carefully constructed. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, recognition, hunger. Then he started walking toward her. The crowd parted like water before him, servants and pack members scrambling out of his path. Lyra's survival instinct screamed at her to run, but her feet felt rooted to the spot. She couldn't look away from him, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. He stopped directly in front of her, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his body. Up close, he was even more imposing, at least 6'4", with sharp features that were almost too perfect, too predatory. The power rolling off him in waves made her wolf stir inside her, clawing at her control for the first time in years. "You," he said softly, his voice somehow audible despite its quietness. "What's your name?" Lyra's mind raced. She couldn't speak. She hadn't spoken in 8 years. If she spoke now, her voice would be rusty, uncertain, and more importantly, speaking would show intelligence, personality, the very thing she'd worked so hard to hide. She stared at him mutely, her lips pressed together. "She doesn't speak, Your Majesty," Mrs. Thornwick interjected nervously, hurrying forward. "The girl's been mute since she arrived here as a child. Simple-minded, but a good worker." Simple-minded. The label Lyra had cultivated, the disguise that had protected her. She forced herself to look vacant, empty, even as her wolf snarled inside her. Cale's eyes narrowed. He leaned closer, inhaling deeply, and Lyra's blood turned to ice. Could he smell her wolf? She'd suppressed it so thoroughly for so long, buried it so deep, surely he couldn't detect what even her own pack hadn't noticed. "What's her name?" Cal repeated, not taking his eyes off Lyra. "Lyra, Your Majesty. She's an Omega, no family, no wolf. She works in the kitchens and housekeeping." "No wolf," Kyle murmured, something dangerous flickering in his expression. His hand rose slowly, and Lyra's breath caught as he touched her chin, tilting her face up to his. His skin was warm against hers, the contact sending electricity shooting through her veins. Interesting. He stared at her for another long moment, his expression unreadable. Lyra fought to keep her face blank, to show nothing of the panic screaming through her. Finally, he stepped back. I want her assigned to my personal service during my stay. She'll attend to my chambers. Your Majesty? Alpha Kieran sounded confused. Surely we can provide more qualified... Her, Kyle interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. Is that understood? Yes, Your Majesty, of course. Kale gave Lyra one last penetrating look before turning away, moving back to the front of the hall to continue the formal proceedings. But Lyra barely heard any of it. Her mind was reeling, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. The Alpha King had noticed her, and from the calculating look in his eyes, he knew, or at least suspected, that she was hiding something. Chapter 3. Dangerous Games. Lyra's hand shook as she carried the dinner tray toward the Alpha King's suite that evening. She'd considered running, simply disappearing into the night. But where would she go? The Alpha King had resources that spanned territories. If he wanted to find her, he would. Besides, running would only confirm his suspicions. No, her best chance was to maintain her disguise, to be so utterly unremarkable that he'd lose interest and leave her alone. She just had to survive the next few days until he departed. She knocked softly on the door, 3 gentle taps. Enter. Lyra pushed the door open with her hip, keeping her eyes down as she carried the tray to the table by the window. The suite was dimly lit, candles casting flickering shadows across the rich furnishings. Kale stood by the window, his back to her, gazing out at the darkening forest beyond the pack grounds. Set it down and come here, he said, without turning around. Lyra's heart hammered. She placed the tray on the table and approached him slowly, stopping a respectful distance away. She could smell him, pine and leather and something wild that made her wolf whine with longing. She ruthlessly suppressed the reaction. Closer. She took one reluctant step forward. Kale turned to face her, and the intensity in his eyes made her want to flee. 8 years, he said quietly. That's how long you've been pretending to be mute, isn't it? Lyra's blood turned to ice. She stared at him, keeping her expression blank, even as panic exploded through her. Don't bother denying it. I can see it in your eyes. You understand every word I'm saying. You're intelligent, aware, and absolutely terrified. He moved closer, circling her slowly. The question is why? What is a young woman so desperate to hide that she'd give up her voice for 8 years? Lyra remained motionless, silent. Here's what I know, Kale continued, his voice conversational but edged with steel. Your scent is unusual, suppressed somehow, but underneath it... He paused directly behind her, close enough that she could feel his breath on her neck. Underneath it, you smell like power, like a wolf far stronger than any Omega. Her pulse thundered in her ears. How was this possible? She'd been so careful. I also know, he continued, moving to face her again, that you're not simple-minded. The way you moved through the hall today, the micro-expressions that cross your face when you think no one's watching. You're observant, strategic. You've made yourself invisible on purpose. He reached out and caught her chin again, forcing her to meet his eyes. So I'll ask you once more, and I suggest you reconsider your silence. What are you hiding, Lyra? The way he said her name made something inside her tremble. But she'd come too far, survived too long to break now. She kept her lips sealed, her expression stubbornly blank. Kale's jaw tightened. You think your silence protects you? You think if you just wait long enough, I'll even forget about you?" He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I am the Alpha King. When I want answers, I get them, one way or another." It wasn't quite a threat, but it wasn't far from one either. Lyra's mind raced, searching for a way out, a strategy to deflect his attention. Then Cale did something unexpected. He released her chin and stepped back, his expression softening slightly. "But I'm not a monster, despite what you may have heard. I won't force you to speak." He returned to the window, his posture deceptively relaxed. "You may go." Lyra didn't need to be told twice. She turned toward the door, moving as quickly as dignity allowed. However, Cale's voice stopped her at the threshold. "I'll be here for 2 weeks. That's a long time to maintain a pretense. People slip up eventually, Lyra, and when you do, I'll be watching." Lyra fled. Chapter 4. Cracks in the Armor. The next 3 days were torture. Kyle seemed to be everywhere, in the halls when she carried linens, in the gardens when she gathered herbs, even in the kitchens when she helped prepare meals. He never spoke to her directly after that first night, but she felt his eyes on her constantly, studying, assessing, waiting for her to make a mistake. And she was making mistakes. Small ones, but mistakes nonetheless. On the second day, she'd been scrubbing the floor outside the Alpha's office when she'd overheard Cale discussing border disputes. Another servant had asked her to pass the soap, and without thinking, Lyra had handed it over, anticipating the request before it was fully voiced, moving with a coordination and awareness that no simple-minded girl should possess. She'd looked up to find Cale watching her through the open office door, a knowing smile playing at his lips. On the third day, she'd been in his chambers, changing the linens, when she'd noticed a book left open on his desk. It was a history of the ancient wolf packs, open to a chapter about silver wolves. Her fingers had itched to read it, and she'd leaned closer without thinking. "Interesting reading?" Cale's voice had come from the doorway, making her jump. She'd spun around to find him leaning against the frame, arms crossed, watching her with those penetrating gray eyes. She'd fled again, but not before seeing his expression. Triumph mixed with something that looked almost like admiration. Now, on the fourth night, Lyra stood in the servants' quarters, staring at her reflection in the small, cracked mirror. She looked exhausted, shadows under her eyes from lack of sleep. How much longer could she maintain the charade? Cale was right. 2 weeks was a long time. Too long. Maybe she should run after all, tonight while everyone slept. She could shift, let her wolf out for the first time in years, and run far enough that even the Alpha King couldn't follow. The thought was tempting. Desperately tempting. A knock at her door made her freeze. At this hour, it was nearly midnight. She opened the door to find one of the Alpha King's guards standing there. "His Majesty requests your presence immediately." Lyra's stomach dropped. She wanted to refuse, to shake her head and close the door, but the guard's expression made it clear this wasn't a request she could decline. She followed him through the silent pack house, up the stairs to Cale's suite. The guard knocked once, then departed, leaving her alone in the hallway. "Come in, Lyra." She pushed the door open. Cale sat in an armchair by the fireplace, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He'd removed his formal jacket, dressed now in just a dark shirt and pants, looking somehow more dangerous in his casual state. "Sit." He gestured to the chair across from him. Lyra remained standing. Cale sighed. "Please, sit. I promise. I'm not going to hurt you." Something in his tone made her obey. She perched on the edge of the chair, every muscle tense, ready to bolt. "Do you know what I do, Lyra?" Cale asked, swirling the liquid in his glass. "When someone interests me?" When I encounter a puzzle I can't quite solve. She didn't respond. I investigate. I ask questions. I dig until I find answers. He took a sip of his drink. So I've spent the past few days learning about you. Would you like to know what I discovered? Lyra's hands clenched in her lap. Lyra Ashworth arrived at the Silver Moon Pack 8 years ago, along with your mother and father. Your father worked in the Pack's security detail until his death 5 years ago. Your mother died shortly after. Grief, they said. His eyes softened slightly. I'm sorry for your loss. The unexpected sympathy made Lyra's throat tight. She loved her parents desperately. Their deaths had been the worst years of her life, made bearable only by the knowledge that they died without ever being separated from her, without seeing her claimed and taken away. What's interesting, Cale continued, is what happened right before you arrived here. Your previous pack was the Crystal Creek Pack, correct? Small territory in the western mountains. Lyra's blood ran cold. He couldn't have traced her that far back, could he? The Crystal Creek Pack had an interesting incident 8 years ago. A young girl's wolf emerged at her coming-of-age ceremony. A silver wolf, extremely rare. But before any alpha could claim her, she vanished, disappeared completely, along with her family. Kyle leaned forward. The girl's name was never recorded in the official reports, but I found someone who remembered her. Her name was Lyra. The world seemed to tilt. Lyra gripped the arms of her chair, fighting to keep her breathing steady. So here's what I think happened, Cale said softly. I think your parents saw what was coming, saw that their daughter would be claimed, probably by someone cruel, someone who'd see her only as a prize. And they ran. They took you away, helped you hide your wolf, helped you become invisible. And when they died, you continued the charade because it was the only protection you had left. Tears burned behind Lyra's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Am I right? Cale asked gently. Lyra wanted to deny it, to shake her head, to maintain her silence, but she was so tired. 8 years of hiding, of fear, of suppressing the most fundamental part of herself. And now this man, this powerful alpha who should terrify her, was looking at her not with greed or hunger, but with understanding. It was that understanding that broke her. Yes, she whispered, her voice cracking from disuse. Yes, you're right. Chapter 5. The Truth Unveiled. Kyle's eyes widened slightly at the sound of her voice, but he didn't move, didn't react with the triumph she'd expected. Instead, he simply nodded, as if she'd confirmed something he'd already known with certainty. Thank you for trusting me with the truth, he said quietly. Lyra laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Trust? I didn't have a choice. You figured it out. You always have a choice. Cale set down his glass and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You could have continued to deny it. I have suspicions, yes, but no proof. You could have maintained your silence and left me wondering. Then why didn't I? Lyra's voice was getting stronger now. 8 years of suppressed words fighting to break free. Why did I just hand you the weapon to destroy me? Because you're exhausted, Cale said simply. Because living a lie is harder than people think, and you've been doing it for 8 years. Because somewhere deep down, you wanted someone to know the truth, even if that someone is me. Lyra looked away, hating that he was right. So what happens now? You claim me? Drag me back to your territory as your prize? Is that what you think I want? It's what every alpha wants, a silver wolf to strengthen their bloodline, to increase their power. Her voice turned sharp. That's all we are to your kind, breeding stock and status symbols. Kyle was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was serious, almost sad. You're not wrong. That's exactly how most alphas view silver wolves. It's how the system has worked for generations. He stood and walked to the window, his back to her. But I didn't become Alpha King by following traditional systems. I changed them. What are you saying? He turned to face her. I'm saying that I have no intention of claiming you against your will, Lyra. You're not a prize to be won or a tool to be used. You're a person with your own agency, your own choices. Lyra stared at him, searching for the lie, the manipulation. I don't believe you. I don't blame you, Cale said. Why should you trust me? You've spent 8 years running from people like me. He moved closer, stopping a few feet away. But let me offer you something. Information. Full transparency about why I'm really here. Despite herself, Lyra was curious. Go on. I came to the Silver Moon Pack because I've been hunting a trafficking ring. Alphas who kidnap rare wolves, silvers, but also others with unique abilities, and sell them to the highest bidder. The trail led here. Lyra's eyes widened. You think the Silver Moon Pack is involved? I think someone in this pack is feeding information to the traffickers, and several rare wolves have disappeared from neighboring territories over the past year. Each time they vanished shortly after someone from the Silver Moon Pack visited that territory. And you thought... Lyra's mind raced. You thought I might be a target. Or already taken, Cale confirmed. When I sensed you in that hall, when I realized what you were hiding, my first thought was that you were being concealed by the traffickers. That's why I insisted on assigning you to my service. To keep you close, to protect you while I investigated. It made a horrible kind of sense. But I've been here for years. If someone knew what I was, they would have taken me already. Not if they didn't know. Cale moved back to his chair, sitting down with a sigh. Your parents did an excellent job hiding you. The mute disguise was brilliant. It's the perfect way to seem unremarkable. But now that I've identified you, if the traffickers have anyone inside this pack house, they'll notice my interest. They'll start asking questions. Fear prickled down Lyra's spine. You've made me a target. Unintentionally, yes, which is why I'm offering you a choice. Cale met her eyes steadily. Come with me when I leave. Join my pack under my protection. You can reveal your wolf or continue to hide it. That's up to you. But at least you'll be safe from the traffickers. In exchange for what? Lyra asked suspiciously. Nothing comes free. No obligation, no claiming, no forced mating. Cale's expression was earnest. You'd simply be a member of my pack, with the same rights and freedoms as anyone else. If eventually you chose to serve in some capacity, security, intelligence, administration, I'd be grateful. Your skills at observation and remaining unnoticed could be valuable, but that's not a requirement. It sounded too good to be true. Why would you do this? What do you gain? Kyle was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. My younger sister was a silver wolf. The past tense hit Lyra like a blow. Was? She was claimed when she was 16 despite my father's protests. He wasn't Alpha King yet, didn't have the power to refuse. The Alpha who took her was brutal. She died within 2 years. Cale's jaw tightened. I've spent the past decade making sure that never happens to another silver wolf, changing laws, hunting traffickers, offering sanctuary to those who need it. So you see, Lyra, what I gain is the knowledge that I've saved someone from my sister's fate. Lyra's throat was tight. I'm sorry about your sister. As am I, every day. Kyle stood moving toward the door. You don't have to decide tonight. Think about it. But please, be careful. Stay in groups. Don't go anywhere alone. If my theory is correct, you're in danger as long as you remain here. Wait, Lyra said as he reached for the door handle. You're leaving? Just like that? You finally got me to speak, confirmed your suspicions, and now you're just leaving? Kyle smiled faintly. You've been silent for 8 years, Lyra. I imagine you have a lot you might want to say now that you've started, but those words are yours to share when and if you choose. I won't pressure you for more tonight. He opened the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I think your parents would be proud of you. You survived, and you did it on your own terms. That takes remarkable strength. Then he was gone, leaving Lyra alone with 8 years of silence finally broken, and a choice that could change everything. Chapter 6. Shadows and Revelations. Lyra didn't sleep that night. She lay in her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, Kyle's words echoing through her mind. Could she trust him? Everything about his story rang true. The grief in his voice when he spoke of his sister, the matter-of-fact way he'd offered protection without demands. But trust was a luxury she'd learned to live without. Still, as dawn light crept through her small window, Lyra had to admit that continuing her charade was becoming impossible. Call knew. And if he knew, how long before others figured it out? She rose and dressed, preparing for another day of service. But as she reached for the door, something made her pause. A sound. No, the absence of sound. The servants' quarters should be buzzing with morning activity by now, but the hallway outside was silent. Lyra opened her door carefully. The corridor was empty, which was wrong. There should be at least a dozen servants moving about, preparing for the day's work. Then she heard it, muffled voices coming from the main hall, and underneath them, a note of fear. Lyra moved silently down the corridor, her years of practiced stealth serving her well. As she approached the main hall, the voices became clearer. Don't care about your pack politics, an unfamiliar male voice was saying. We traced her here, the Silver Wolf. Hand her over and we'll leave peacefully. Lyra's blood turned to ice. Traffickers. Kale had been right. I don't know what you're talking about, Alpha Kieran replied. But Lyra could hear the tremor in his voice. There's no Silver Wolf here. Don't lie to me. The stranger's voice turned menacing. The Alpha King showed unusual interest in one of your servants, a girl named Lyra. Where is she? Lyra pressed herself against the wall, her heart hammering. She needed to run, to hide. But where? If they'd already surrounded the compound. A hand closed over her mouth from behind, cutting off her startled gasp. She struggled instinctively, but a familiar scent stopped her. Pine and leather and something wild. Don't make a sound. Kale's voice was barely a whisper in her ear. Come with me, now. He removed his hand and grabbed hers, pulling her swiftly down a side corridor. Lyra followed, having no other choice as he led her through servants' passages she didn't even know existed. Behind them, she could hear shouts erupting in the main hall. How many? She whispered. At least 8 that I've counted, maybe more outside. Kyle pushed open a hidden door that led to the kitchens. They moved faster than I expected. I thought we'd have more time. You knew they'd come. I suspected. Last night, one of my guards noticed someone following you. We've been monitoring the situation, but they mobilized faster than anticipated. He glanced back at her, his expression grim. I'm sorry. I put you at risk. They emerged from the kitchens into the courtyard. Dawnlight illuminated the chaos unfolding across the compound. Pack members were being herded into groups, and Lyra could see several unfamiliar wolves prowling the perimeter, the traffickers' enforcers. The forest, Kyle said. If we can reach the tree line. Stop right there, Your Majesty. They froze. A tall man with cruel eyes stepped out from the stables, flanked by 2 massive wolves. He smiled, but there was nothing pleasant in it. Marcus Vane, Kale said coldly. I should have known you'd be behind this. Did you really think you could interfere with my operation and face no consequences? Marcus's smile widened. You've been very troublesome, Kale. Shutting down my sources, freeing my merchandise. But this time, you've led me straight to the greatest prize of all. A silver wolf you're clearly quite protective of. Let her go, Kale said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. Your quarrel is with me. Oh, I'll deal with you too, Marcus assured him. But first, the girl comes with us. Don't worry. She'll fetch an excellent price. I have 3 alphas already bidding. Sight unseen. Rage flashed across Kale's face. Over my dead body! That can be arranged. Marcus gestured, and his wolves lunged forward. Kale shoved Lyra behind him, shifting in a blur of motion into a massive black wolf, larger than any Lyra had ever seen. He met the attackers head-on, teeth and claws flashing. But there were too many. More wolves emerged from the buildings surrounding them. Kale fought valiantly, taking down 2 attackers, but a third caught him from the side, massive jaws closing on his shoulder. Lyra watched the Alpha King, the most powerful alpha in generations, brought to his knees, and something inside her snapped. For 8 years, she'd hidden. For 8 years, she'd been silent and small and invisible, letting others fight her battles. But she was done hiding. She was done being afraid. Power surged through Lyra's body as she released the control she'd maintained for so long. Her shift was explosive, raw energy crackling through the air as silver-white fur erupted across her skin. She grew, larger than she'd ever been before, 8 years of suppression unleashing in a single moment. Her wolf was magnificent, larger than any normal she-wolf, with fur like moonlight and eyes like molten silver, and she was furious. Lyra's wolf let out a howl that shook the compound, a sound of rage and defiance that made every wolf present freeze. Then she launched herself at the wolf attacking Kale, her powerful jaws closing on its neck. She threw it aside effortlessly, placing herself between Kale and the traffickers. The courtyard had gone silent. Every wolf, every pack member stared at her in awe and terror. Marcus recovered first, his eyes gleaming with greed. Magnificent, he breathed. Even better than the report suggested. Take her alive. His wolves attacked as one, but they'd underestimated her. Lyra had spent 8 years studying, watching, learning. She might have hidden her wolf, but she'd never stopped training her mind. She anticipated their moves, dancing between attacks with preternatural grace. Kale, recovered now, fought beside her. Together they moved like they'd been partnered for years, covering each other's flanks, coordinating without words. It was beautiful and terrible, a dance of lethal precision. But they were still outnumbered. For every wolf they brought down, another appeared. Lyra's muscles burned, her stamina, unused for so long, beginning to fail. Then a new howl split the air. Reinforcements poured into the courtyard, Kale's guards, finally responding to the attack. And behind them, to Lyra's surprise, came members of the Silver Moon Pack, choosing to defend rather than hide. The tide turned quickly. The traffickers, realizing they were outmatched, began to retreat. Marcus backed toward the gates, his expression twisted with fury. This isn't over, he snarled at Kale. That wolf is worth a fortune. I will have her. If you come near her again, Kale growled, his wolf's voice resonating with alpha command, I will personally tear you apart. Marcus fled, his remaining wolves covering his retreat. As the dust settled, Lyra shifted back to human form, suddenly aware that she was naked in the courtyard, her clothes shredded by her transformation. Someone threw a cloak over her shoulders. Kyle, back in human form himself, his own shoulder bleeding from the earlier attack. You saved my life, he said quietly. You saved mine first, Lyra replied, her newly freed voice still rough but growing stronger. I think we're even. Around them, the pack members stared in wonder and fear. Lyra met their gazes, chin raised, no longer hiding. She was done with invisibility. Alpha Kieran, Kale called out, his voice carrying authority despite his injury. I believe we have much to discuss about the security of your pack. But first, he turned to Lyra. You fought brilliantly. Have you made your decision? Lyra knew what he was asking. After today, she could never go back to hiding. Marcus would hunt her, and there would be others like him. Staying here meant constant danger, not just for her, but for everyone around her. But leaving meant trusting Kale, trusting his promise of protection without obligation. She thought of her parents, of their sacrifice to give her a choice. She thought of Kay,